Why don't we go ahead and take our seats and we'll go ahead and get started. Thank you all for being here. My name is Jim Turley. I'm the Chairman and CEO of Ernst & Young. And we have a very interesting discussion today about a topic some of you may be not familiar with. It's a topic, it's about megaregions. And let me just describe that a little bit. Traditionally, we've always thought about economic growth and economic activity in terms of countries or nations. And that's been relatively unchallenged. That thought process has continued for years and years and years. You know, we talk about the BRIC countries, we talk about the United States, we talk about the European countries or the EU, but now there's a different way to think about things. There's a professor named Richard Florida, who is a best-selling author, and he's a leading thinker in many different categories, and he's put forth a theory that the real driving force behind economic growth is not countries, but it's a new unit that he calls a mega-region. Now, Florida, not the state in the United States, but Florida, the author, has looked at this and he's studied this in some very interesting ways. He's cross-calibrated nighttime illumination that you can only see from space with economic activity, with the number of patents granted by particular geographies, with a whole array of innovation, and has concluded that instead of thinking in terms of 191 different countries, we ought to think in terms of 40 mega-regions. He sees these 40 mega-regions as contributing over 2/3 of the world's economic output, 85% of the world's innovation, and doing all this by utilizing only 18% of the world's population. So it's quite interesting. He actually writes about something, I found this interesting. He said, and I quote, "When large numbers of entrepreneurs, financiers, engineers, designers, and other smart creative people are constantly bumping into one another, innovative business ideas are formed, sharpened, executed, and expanded." To me, that sounds a lot about similar to what happens in Davos, what happens here in Tianjin, bringing together a whole bunch of smart people. But that's his theory behind these mega-regions. That's what we're here to talk about today. We've got a very distinguished panel that represent governments, they represent companies, they represent cities. Why don't we just go down the line and introduce yourselves, please, and tell us where you're from and what you do.
Thank you. My name is Christian Sautter. I'm French from Paris. I have been Minister of Finance and now I'm in charge of international attractiveness of the megaregion of Paris.
Thank you.
Good morning. My name is Steve Dobbs. I'm Senior Group President of Fluor Corporation. I've worked for Fluor for about 28 years. My primary experience has been development, engineering, construction of large capital projects. It's heavy industrial, chemical, power, and infrastructure, including a lot of transportation and alternative energy, particularly around private finance initiatives and public-private partnerships.
Good morning. I'm Mike Antonovich, Los Angeles County Supervisor. I had served in the state legislature in California. I taught school, and as supervisor, govern 10.4 million citizens of Los Angeles County. We have 5 supervisors. Each of us have 2.1 million constituency. About 900,000 are responsible for voting for us into office. I've been there for 28 years. We have a $22.5 billion budget and basically in 88 cities. Los Angeles is just one of our cities, but we have 88 cities, and we have a great deal of involvement with foreign trade, which is a vital link in our county's economy and our state's economy.
My name is Heizo Takenaka from Japan, professor of Keio University. I used to be a Minister for Economic and Fiscal Policy and Minister for Financial Services of Japan. I'm not sure whether I'm the very right person to discuss this issue, but anyway, let me discuss from the viewpoint of macroeconomists. Thank you.
Well, thank you all. I think it's a great audience. As we were backstage, I know that you were telling us that you've read this, you've studied this, have a few perspectives. Maybe you could just talk a little bit about what you expect the impact of these mega-regions would be on the global economy, how you think about this phenomenon.
I think that in the economy, and maybe in the economic competition of this century, you must have proximity but you must have also a critical mass of innovation, and you must have a critical mass of market. Just an example on Paris, we have 11 million people living in this mega region. We have 400 million consumers within 3 hours of transportation, and we have 136,000 researchers and many big companies. So I think we have the necessary elements to be competitive in tradition, tourism, culture, but also in innovation, and maybe we'll come back to that.
Well, let's stay with that for a second, because when you say you have the necessary elements, what needs to take place to make those elements come together to actually generate the kind of innovation you're talking about?
Well, I take the example of innovation, and I would not make an opposition between the government and the local authorities of the Paris region. We work together, and just to give you an example, 5 years ago the government decided to build clusters, and on the Paris region, by cooperation between the government and the local authorities, we created 7 clusters on international, on communication, on biotechnologies, on finance, on green industries. So I think there should be a balance between local authorities and the government. Local authorities alone cannot do everything, and we have the example in the US now where the government is influential in the financial situation, but you need a balance and some emulation between both.
Thank you. Takenaka-san, Tokyo and the greater Tokyo region is the largest mega-region according to Professor Florida's research. Reactions from Japan?
Well, basically, Tokyo has a great potential, and not only Tokyo, but including the Yokohama, Chiba areas, or Tokyo mega region, we have much potential, I agree. The discussion done by Mr. Florida is very interesting in one sense. That is, what is the basic nature of innovation? Yes, innovation is important. What's the basic nature of innovation? Most important factor is to combine various kinds of resources. Combining the factors is the real source of the innovation. In that sense, mega-region role is quite important, connecting new talents, connecting new capital, new technology, etc., etc. In that sense, Tokyo, Yokohama area are enjoying a very, a great merit. On the other hand, now this mega-region now faces a very great, important challenge from a viewpoint of macroeconomists and fiscal policy specialists. That is pressure from the local area. Well, since this is we live in the nation state, so the kind of income distribution is needed. In the case of Tokyo, Tokyo is competing with Seoul, Beijing, Shanghai, etc., etc. At the same time, from the viewpoint of people living in the rural area, Tokyo is a very envious place. So they are demanding some redistribution of income from mega region to the local area. So this is another important factor to be discussed in case we discussed mega region or mega city problem.
You know, the issues you've raised are fascinating, talking about innovation, talking about income redistribution as well. You know, one of Professor Florida's point of view is that making sure that we stop, in his words, the transfer of wealth, you know, from these mega regions outside the mega regions is important to the future of global economies. Because from his perspective, when he looks at things, the mega regions are by far the most productive economic engines in the world. And he sees many government policies that are actually encouraging wealth transfer outside of those mega regions. I don't know, Mike, you were kind of standing in as a late stand-in, but I'm interested, coming from the Los Angeles area, again, one of the top 10 of the mega regions in Southern California, how you feel about things like this?
Well, economic policy also drives business. And if you're going to make it more costly to do business in a location, you're going to find competition in other areas drawing those businesses. We have a problem in that our ports are the 5th busiest in the world, but there's a movement now to build a new port in Mexico because of some of the additional costs that are occurring at the Long Beach, Los Angeles harbors. So we have to be competitive. We have to do a better job, and that stimulus to keep jobs means trying to eliminate unnecessary bureaucracy and keep taxes lower and be competitive. But the taxing policies and the bureaucracy is what drives a business to expand or to move away.
You know, Steve, I'm interested in your point of view. This is a meeting of the new champions, and wondering whether you or any of the panelists have a perspective on where global growth companies, how they think about mega regions when they're thinking about, you know, locating their companies, when they're thinking about access to resources, whether you have perspective on those issues.
Sure. As a builder, it's kind of interesting. I get a chance to deal with a lot of the public entities in terms of doing public works projects. And it's very clear that an ability to set a long-term policy and stick with it is one of the biggest benefits you have in the ability to have infrastructure to support a mega region. And in some cases, like here in Tianjin, where you're building something on a greenfield basis, it's a lot better to put that together and plan for the long term as opposed to a situation like you might have in Paris or in Los Angeles, where you're trying to build an infrastructure over the top of something that's already existing. But one of the frustrations I continue to have may be a direct result of the change in the way a mega region may be perceived from a government standpoint. If you look particularly in the United States and Western Europe, our structure of government was put in place a long time ago that started with a city or a municipality and went up to a county or a parish and then a state or a province. In those times when population was a lot less dense, that made sense. I wouldn't mind to hear Michael's comment, but today you have a lot of municipalities which actually have grown beyond the limits of the smaller elements of government like a county or a parish government. And now you get into a lot of conflict in terms of setting priorities and goals between sub-elements of what would become a mega region versus a policy that affects the region as a whole.
You know, one thing that characterizes these mega regions is certainly increased density of population. You get a variety of different points of view around the issue of density. Again, Florida is arguing, frankly, in favor of more dense concentration of people because, again, his core premise is that when people are bumping into each other, the sparks that fly, you know, create the innovation that drives the future of the economies. Perspectives?
Yes, we are building in the Paris region a master plan for the next 20 years, and we advocate density because with a very costly gasoline, with the necessity to protect the environment, it's better to build a medium-sized city, and 10 million people is a medium size, with the density. I think I'm sorry, but the American model of spreading the cities far away and using cars to commute, I think this model is over.
You don't need to apologize to me. I happen to carry a U.S. passport, but I spend most of my time all around the world, so it's okay. When you think about, you know, this issue of density, it also impacts, Steve, infrastructure a great deal, as you were saying. And so you're seeing that as well in a variety of infrastructure projects, I guess?
We do. And as a builder, of course, it's a lot more efficient model if you have a dense model. I mean, whether it's communications or transportation or even, you know, lines of commodity movement, much more efficient. And one of the benefits you get out of a mega region and density is, of course, the term leverage, so that when growth is underway, it's very, very good. I think it's also important for everybody to keep in mind that the same leverage works the other way around. And so as we look to the benefits of increased density, we need to be aware of the additional risks of increased density as well. Because when things turn around the other way, you have a very, very dense population of people, which for either a natural event or a man-made event may need to be supported. It's a lot more difficult to do that. And even in a case of financial distress, if you have a distributed population, it's a lot easier to take care of that as an issue than it is when you have a very, very dense population. So as we encourage the growth of density for our own efficiency and productivity reasons in growth regions, and it's very, very positive, we just need to keep in mind the downside of that and be prepared to handle that if necessary.
Takenaka-san, Tokyo is as I said, the largest of the mega-regions. It wrestles with infrastructure issues. It also, you talked about the innovation power that comes in Tokyo. Anything to add to this?
Well, let me mention a little bit about the population density of Tokyo. Tokyo is the city where population densely inhabited? Maybe no. Population in density, if we compare, as whole, is much higher than that of Tokyo. Well, Tokyo is a very spread city, and so-called Fluor phenomena we experience. Now, however, after the burst of the bubble, the land price of the central part of Tokyo has been declining, and many people are coming back to the central part of Tokyo. This is actually we are experiencing. This is providing a very positive aspect to the human life. The commuting hour is shortened, and the number of the commuters coming to the central part of Tokyo is now decreasing. Well, this is a good phenomenon this way, and this important point is this increases the energy efficiency in total, and that is exactly we experience. In that sense, the point mentioned by Professor Florida, Dr. Florida is correct, I understand. Now the relationship you mentioned between this population density and innovation. Well, as I mentioned already, the new connection or connecting new resources will be the most important source. In that sense, in the case of Tokyo, our efficiency is no, or the power of innovation is also increasing. At the same time, the most important point in case we discuss the innovation is the openness. When this society, this region is opened or not, openness is another important factor to be considered in case the future development of the mega region.
It's interesting when you think about density. Unfortunately, one of the participants of the panel had to cancel, Mayor Xu from Shenzhen. I remember a couple of years ago when I was in a meeting here in China, the Minister of the People was saying that at that time she expected 300 or 400 million Chinese to migrate from the farms to the cities over the next decade. And it's all about density, it's all about infrastructure, it's all about bringing this sort of collaborative innovation together in a way that would be very, very powerful for the mega regions here in China. Mike, you've been in government for a long period of time, as you said. I'm curious how governments should respond to mega-regions. The mega-region that Dr. Florida looks at actually encompasses not just Los Angeles and Los Angeles County, but also San Diego and all the way down to Tijuana. And so as he looks at your mega-region, it's not just the county, it's not just the city, it's not just the state, it's also different countries. How should governments think as this phenomenon continues?
When you talk about density, Los Angeles County has 88 cities, as small as about 2,000 to our largest city, which is Los Angeles City, has about 3.9 million people. So you can't have a one-shoe-fits-all type of density program. So you need to ensure that you have a balance and consider the individual, not some mandate from on top, but it's got to come from the bottom up. But when it comes to air quality, which relates to bringing in new industries, we have a 4-county body called the Southern California Air Quality Management District. I represent Los Angeles County on this body of the 4 counties. And we help establish policies for clean air, like we're putting in encouraging the policies of natural gas at our 2 ports, which is going to really help in the long run. And then we have a very serious problem. We have 28,000 trucks a day idling to get these containers off of the ships and out to the rest of the world. 70% of those cargo containers go outside of Los Angeles County. So I'm involved in bringing Los Angeles County and San Bernardino County on a joint powers authority to move in, create inland ports where we can take the containers via rail out to these outlying areas and then out to the rest of the nation. This is going to eliminate congestion, provide incentives for people to move closer to their jobs, and it's also going to help improve air quality, which will lessen the type of regulations that would prevent job creation. And so these are the types of programs that I'm personally involved with.
But let me push you a little more, and also be ready to push the mayor of Paris, because the governments today are not aligned with these mega-regions. I mean, let's be really clear that there are multiple different governments, as you've just said, in at least the way Dr. Florida defines the mega-region that encompasses entire Southern California and Tijuana, Mexico. And in fact, today, I'm quite certain there's internal competition within that mega-region as far as, if a company is moving in, you'd rather have it in Los Angeles. I'm sure the mayor of San Diego would rather have it in San Diego. And I'm quite certain both the mayor and the president of Tijuana would rather have, of Mexico, would rather have it in Mexico. Similar to the Paris, based broad region. How do governments figure out a way to collaborate and think together when, if this model is true, the economic drivers of the world are going to be different than the way the governments are structured?
I think the cooperation can be in two fields, at least. The first one is transportation.
Okay.
Instead of building highways, what is important is to build new high-speed subways, new high-speed trains, and better air connections. And this comes from cooperation. The second one is that you need housing, and we should work together to build the housing, and including the social housing, near the places where the jobs are. And this kind of planning needs some government support, because in France at least, social housing is largely financed by government. So maybe there can be sometimes political opposition or economic competition, but I think basically it should be a win-win game between government and mega-regions.
Listening to you say that in France housing is often funded by the government, that wasn't the intention in the United States, but it may be where we end up in just a little while. I'm not certain. Hearing the comment about transportation and infrastructure, Steve, that's got to warm your heart, because it certainly would be both beneficial to the infrastructure builders of the world to see more of that develop, but also to see it handled on a more pan-regional basis as opposed to individual city by city. Steve, reaction?
Absolutely true. And certainly the models that you can look at as population gets more dense allows you to do some things that you couldn't otherwise do. And the best thing about a very successful mega-region is that any of the models that you look to finance public infrastructure certainly deal with looking at the growth and the ability of an area to grow. And an area under growth lends itself to a lot of positive ways to finance, or at least it used to be when there was a valid credit market. And so in terms of a vibrant, successful mega-region looking forward at a growth rate, you can always expect a revenue stream that will allow you to finance the forms of transportation infrastructure that you describe. Maybe a little bit counter to what Florida was talking about, though, in terms of not using money from a mega-region to support something outside of that region. I think the mega-regions themselves need to recognize some level of responsibility for areas outside that region. Certainly, Tokyo wouldn't consider itself to be self-sufficient, and neither would Los Angeles or Paris. So there is a need for natural resources, for agricultural support for clean water, fuel, and other things that come into that region. And because of that, you need to recognize the mega-region has a lot more of an ability to finance its own infrastructure than some of those other regions that may be supporting the mega-region.
Let me throw things open to the audience, and if people have questions or comments they'd like to make, either comments or questions to any of the panelists, please get prepared and raise your hand. I'm sure there'll be some microphone runners up and down the aisles if anyone has a thought they'd like to share relative to this. Yes, here in the middle, microphone.
Thank you. My name is Ben Caulfield. I'm with the United States Agency for International Development. The question I would like to pose to the panel is what are the opportunities as well as challenges that the developing world faces in relation to these mega regions? And looking at some of the mega region cities in the developing world like Lagos, Delhi, Bombay, Mexico City, what are opportunities as well as challenges for these mega regions as engines of economic growth? Thank you.
Please, go ahead.
The first requirement is political stability. You aren't going to invest millions, billions of dollars at a location if the political environment is one of instability and your investment's not going to be protected, or the ability to do what you want it to do in working in a partnership with those people.
Other reactions to that? Yes, that's next one.
Well, in the case of developing countries, I think so-called mega cities will have a great opportunity to develop. Under such circumstances, as I already mentioned, income gap will become very serious social problem. It could be. So for that purpose also, the stability of projects is very important. And also, they will face a very serious lack in infrastructure. And that's how to finance that. This the financing, how to finance infrastructure will be another important challenge, I think.
You're going to add something?
Yes, I would say that you have to reconcile size and quality. Mega regions are not only big regions. They are regions where there is some quality of life, some density of innovation, and with the exception of Tokyo, I lived in, 10 million people is, I think, the optimal size to create advanced research, to create advanced technological companies. If you run after your size, you have the big problems of infrastructure, of education, and of economic development.
You know, it's interesting, your comments about 10 million people being the optimal size. In the mega-region analysis that was done, Greater Tokyo has 55 million people. The corridor from Boston through New York down to Washington, D.C. has 54 million people. And then the corridor near
This is
Chicago.
not a mega city. It's a cluster of mega cities.
No, I know, which is precisely what some of the thesis is. I'm not saying this thesis is right, by the way, but it is what they're seeing is how, at least what Dr. Florida sees, is how connected these mega cities are, these large cities are, to create mega regions of economic activity. There was a question right over here, I think.
I'm not going to ask a question, as perhaps make a comment. First of all, the first remark is that in some ways it reminds me, the concept of mega-region reminds me of another concept about 20 years ago. The concept of competitiveness and competitive advantage. In the sense that no sooner had this thesis been put forward, there was a struggle to find out what are the sources of competitive advantages, what can we do. Well, mega-regions are not there not because some government has built it. They are there because they are autonomous in some ways of the government. In fact, I would perhaps go to the extent that they succeed as mega regions because they can form a nucleus. They can form a very powerful, maybe lobby, maybe an interest group, maybe a like-minded intellectual discourse, so that whatever else is happening in that society or in that country is actually counterbalanced, and the region is secure and insulated to be able to actually pursue its innovation. So because this is something which we from the developing world fall prey to very, very quickly, that now there is a mega region, so we must start thinking about mega regions, put all the infrastructure in place. It succeeds in getting infrastructure also, primarily because of its essential strength. And I think the essence of that was that putting a bunch of smart guys together fairly intensely together. So that is the secret. I don't think the government should try anywhere. Maybe Paris is trying, good luck to them. to make a mega region of Paris. Paris is always a mega region for the last 400 years that I know. It has always been one. So perhaps what they would try is, yes, some of the things sound good, master plan, densification and so on and so forth, very, very good. But essential drivers are autonomous. This is something which I think I would like to say. Thank you.
Interesting comment.
Atul Kumar Rai.
Okay. Yes, up here right in front, ma'am. Microphone up here.
Thank you very much. Good morning. Vijay Punusami from Etihad Airways in Abu Dhabi. Abu Dhabi recently just adopted a master plan for year 2030, which basically sets out the planning horizon. My question is, how do you reconcile the need for these long-term urban planning to the short-term political mandates of the leaders of the regions?
It's a great question. We have a couple of politicians here. Reactions?
Well, it's difficult. It's very difficult, and we have a discussion now in the Paris region about our master plan. But I think if you look at infrastructure, and you are better to speak about it than me, you must have a 30 to 50 years horizon because they are long-term infrastructure. I would say also that in education, in universities, laboratories, technological clusters, you do not work with a 5-year horizon. You must work on a longer horizon. What is very important is to have a long-term framework, but to be pragmatic in daily action. You know, if you have only exhaustive planning, you fail, and we had experience in the past. But if you don't know where you go, if you have no star to look at, you go astray, and maybe you are less efficient. That's my conviction.
What we've done in our county, we established Economic Development Corporation, which Bill Allen is the director of, and they represent the entire county and also are engaged in public policy. You need to have public-private participation. You need to have input from the bottom, and those associations or groups that you're going to legislate with and for involved in determining those regulations, so you come out with a consensus and move forward instead of litigation and stagnation and chaos.
Very short comment. In the case of Tokyo, we had a similar master plan or basic vision, but please forget about that. It's not realized yet. It depends on the nature of the basic design, I think.
Steve, I'm curious. When I heard Michael talk about public-private participation, my understanding is that's one of the things that you and Fluor Corporation are quite expert in, is the whole public-private finance.
Right. Let me start off by saying, Christian, I agree with what you said 100%. It's got to be a very long-term objective, and sometimes I think democratic governments have a very, very difficult time taking a long-term look at something just because of the political process that we're in. But I have to give credit to France as a country in terms of its long-term program of nuclear power, putting in high-speed train system, and ultimately when you look at the success of a mega-region long-term, you might say that it's independent of a government, but certainly its ability to thrive in the future is very, very dependent on the long-term infrastructure that's put in place to support that. And if you compare France to some other countries today, I think you will be well served by the program that you've been able to put into place. We had a conversation earlier about Lagos and other countries that may be developing, and Michael gave the correct response that a stable political environment is very, very important for setting in place what it takes to put infrastructure there. But I have to say that also works in even places like Los Angeles that you might think you have a stable form of government. It takes establishing a policy and sticking with that policy for a longer period of time than a 2 or 4 year election cycle and the ability to do something. So there's no difference between not having a stable government and having something labeled a stable government that changes its policy every 2 to 4 years, which would prevent you from having the long-term planning that Christian talked about. And then the same thing works for any kind of private finance or public-private partnership. The private side only wants to partner with a government that they can understand the long-term benefit of that. And sometimes if the funding levels are determined by an election process that's 2 or 4 years in length, it's very, very difficult to establish the financing for a concession agreement or some other financing vehicle that may last 20, 30, 50, or 90 years in terms of the confidence of the private side being willing to invest money. So it all goes back to exactly what Christian said to start work, which is a long-term view, and then a stable political environment that you can count on the legislation being in place for a period of time that you can recoup your investment.
Other questions from the floor? Up here, here, go right up here, and then we'll come over here next.
Thank you. My name is Umaru Fadil. I'm the mayor of Douala 3 in Cameroon. How do we manage the use of land in the concept of megaregions? For instance, in Tokyo alone, there are 24% of Japanese population live in Tokyo, and they only occupy 4% of the land. So my question is, how do we manage the use of land? Thank you.
Well, it's a very difficult issue, I understand. I'm not in charge of that issue in the Tokyo Metropolitan Government. But anyway, well, especially it depends on the legal framework of each country, I think. In the case of Japan, the right ownership of land is strictly strong. Under such circumstances, even for the government, it's quite difficult to change the use of land, web use of land. So, in the case of government of Japan, they have some suggestions. Also, Tokyo government has some kind of suggestions. This ideal use of land is such and such. And referring to that suggestions, private sector has their own plan for development. Or in some cases, government provides some profit to have to provide some incentives to realize that suggested plan, but still, this is quite weak in my understanding. So you kindly mentioned about the case of Tokyo, but very regrettably, we do not have very strong mechanism to control this use of land. But still, Tokyo is changing a lot. To some extent, the price of land changes, and if combining some piece of land, the value of the land is increasing. This market mechanism is helping to some extent for the better use of land.
Thank you. Please.
My name is Bill Allen. I'm the president of the Los Angeles County Economic Development Corporation. And
I'm glad he gave you credit then.
Thank you. Well, he in fact founded this corporation back in 1981. And it is today hundreds of large employers and government agencies and educational institutions who have recently, because of the work of Dr. Fluor and others, recognized that we are in a very large mega region and we need to plan more than just within our county. Though our county is the 18th largest economy in the world, the state economy is the 8th largest in the world, and we're highly interrelated. So we've recently been creating new organizations such as the Southern California Leadership Council, led by the private sector. And that is the point I wanted to make is, in addition to our government entities needing to work together, we're encouraging our private sector to take stronger leadership about planning for the future of our mega region. And so this leadership council throughout Southern California is engaged in activity around trade infrastructure, around reliable water supply, around greenhouse gas emissions, issues that affect much more than our county or individual cities. And so I would encourage our global young leaders and the new champions to take a leadership role in their regions, along with their government partners, to addressing these challenges that either hinder our economy or enable our economies to grow.
Bill, thank you. It's interesting how what you're saying is, in some ways, because governments won't be changed to reflect the mega-region concept, you almost need the private sector to fill in the white space, between the governments and make it all work together seamlessly. And it's interesting that you commented specifically on trade, because it's one of the issues that we hadn't really touched on very much, but is incredibly important to the mega regions themselves. Part of what keeps them going is the concept of trade. Part of what worries me about the state of the economy today and the state of the world is a potential increase in protectionism across the globe. And so I'm curious whether any of the panelists have a perspective on either Bill Allen's comments and how they intersect with trade. Please, go ahead.
I agree with the essential role of the private sector, and it should be a triangle action in a long-term perspective. But
triangle between private sector,
local authorities, and government.
Okay.
But I want to say that the thesis of Mr. Florida, saying that the mega-regions are rich, dynamic, and they should be selfish and not transferring any income to other regions, this theory is politically absolutely wrong. It's very intense discussion in Italy, and I think that it's going back to Middle Age when you had Venice, Bruges, Amsterdam, and so on, and no countries. I think there is one American people, one French people, one Italian people, and we should keep economic development at the proper level.
But you know, you're right, and I could tell that I wish Dr. Florida were here to get into a debate with you, because he would argue that, I think, and I haven't spoken with him, but I think he would argue that French people and American people and Italian people, that we are quickly approaching an era in the world where citizens will become less affiliated with a country than they have been before, and more affiliated with a mega-region as far as how that mega-region drives their life, their expectations, their ability to succeed, their ability to attract a talented workforce from across a contiguous region. And I think he's saying the countries are becoming less important in his frame of thinking. Again, I'm not saying he's right. Takenaka-san, you had your hand up?
Well, as I mentioned by Mr. Sautter, income redistribution is definitely needed from the viewpoint of economists, from the viewpoint of former politicians. However, referring to the idea by Professor Florida, we should now discuss very carefully redefinition of the government. Let me introduce the one effort of the Japanese government. Now we have roughly speaking, 1,000 cities in Japan, and about 50 prefectures also, and central government. We are now going to reconstruct this total system. Let's abolish the system of prefecture, 50 prefecture system. Let's create 10 states. So the power of the central government should be delivered to this state. Under such circumstances, we should discuss this redistribution issues. Redistribution income is definitely needed. Still, we need another redefinition or a new definition of the government, the framework of the new government.
Let me go back. It's an excellent comment. Let me go back to this question of countries, because I'm sitting here processing this discussion and thinking about my organization, Ernst & Young. We have people in 140 different countries around the world. We serve a lot of great clients, like Fluor Corporation, sitting up here on the dais. Fluor wants to be served with seamless, consistent, high-quality service everywhere around the world, with the precise belief that they don't want to think our service is impacted country to country to country. And so in some ways, well, in many ways, we have within Ernst & Young organized ourselves around geographies and business units that are more market-facing. It doesn't align with Florida's 40 mega-regions, but it's not wholly dissimilar, because what we found is that's what our clients want. And that's the way the companies of today that are global are thinking, more so than in terms of governments. The traditional country boundaries are less relevant than they have been in the past. I don't know, Steve, whether that's your experience as you work around the globe.
No, I think you're absolutely right. I think for multinational or global companies, clearly you don't associate yourself with a single mega region. In fact, to be successful and continue to grow, you're going to try and support all of those that you possibly can. And I think, of course, it depends on your market, how you orient yourself, Jim. I mean, if you're a service company, obviously you need to orient yourself one way. From Fluor's standpoint, there are markets that might be servicing other global companies or other multinationals in heavy industry or chemical. We orient ourselves by that market worldwide, so we don't make a distinction of geography. We're just providing a service in those markets. Other services like infrastructure are much more specific and regional, and so it's always a personal side when you're dealing with infrastructure of a certain area. So we would have a market directed specifically at Paris or at Los Angeles in terms of that market. So I think the way you face the market kind of depends on what you're selling, but as a multinational company, you certainly see yourself not associated with a single region, but to target those regions.
Excellent point. Other questions, comments? Over here to the left of the audience.
I have noticed that there is considerable innovation that is happening over the internet, and also video conferencing is also another model with which people are interacting with each other. How do you see this to impact innovation and the importance of megacities as centers of innovation? Thank you.
Comments from the panel around that? The intersection of the internet and innovation with the concept of megaregions?
Just a word. It's much easier now to communicate across the world, but we need face-to-face meeting, like this meeting, you know. You can discuss and you can have professional and warm relations with people you know, you have already met. That's my conviction. After you can send mails and have video conference. May I just introduce another concept, which would be mega continents. I think the states are torn between regions and continents, and we have the American continent, we have the Chinese continent, and China is not Shenzhen plus Shanghai and so on. And we have the Indian continent, and we try to build the European continent, because you will need to have a broader space, and I think these spaces are useful even in a global perspective, because you need some regulation, you need some solidarity, you need some long-term planning for that. And I think the continent is the proper side.
Well, and I think at some level you're also, it wasn't intentional, I'm certain, leaving out the African continent with 800 million people who have great opportunities in Africa as well. Other comments on internet or innovation from the panel? Please.
This is actually happened, we experienced in the case of one Japanese company. Yes, the communications through internet became double or triple, for example. Of course, this is good, this will enhance the productivity. At the same time, the number of the meetings where people directly get together increased. This is that we are experiencing in so-called net or societal digital revolution. Yes, internet, the innovations through the internet is very important. At the same time, combining the resources that I mentioned directly, this opportunity should be also enhanced. This is the reason why the power of the city is becoming much more important.
Other questions? Yes, here towards the front.
Lady.
Where's the lady in the... There's another lady with a question in the back. I'll come next. Okay, first here.
Thank you. Martin Rogers from Clifford Chance, the law firm. And I wonder if people would comment on whether the international organisations, the IFCs brings to mind, can have a role in this, to what extent they do play a role. For example, in the sponsoring of privatised infrastructure projects, where the IFC will, based on selectivity criteria, which include political stability, include an economic assessment of a project, will get involved and sponsor and lock in the parties, if you like, to a 25, 50-year franchise agreement for managing a project. To what extent do bodies like IFC have a role in this context?
Yeah, to the The short answer is obviously anything that adds to the stability of the agreement or the assurance of risk that you're going to be able to get your return back on your money is a huge advantage in that. And to the extent that anything that was facilitating an agreement between different political bodies to help that out is an advantage in doing the project.
Woman in back over here.
Hello. I'm the reporter from China Entrepreneur magazine, and nowadays the term of community is more important than the country or the region itself. So I'm wondering, many elements has been reshuffled in this faster growing century. So I'm just wondering, how could you foster your unique culture and to gathering so many intellectuals in your so-called mega-regions? I think this is more important. Economy is important, but based on that, the culture, those more eternal elements maybe counts much. Okay, thank you.
Perhaps when you talk about culture, hearing a discussion from Los Angeles might be, where there's clearly a melting pot of several different cultures might...
Los Angeles County has people from every part of the world. We have 140 various cultures, 135 languages spoken there. We have the largest concentration of ethnic people from various countries residing in Los Angeles County, such from the Philippines, Thailand, Mexico, El Salvador. 43% of our businesses have an Asian partner. Asian Americans are Asian population is the third largest population group in Los Angeles County and going in our state of California. And as a result of having all of these various ethnic communities within our county, we have great opportunities and involvement in international affairs, economically, job creation. Over 380,000 of our jobs from our ports are related to foreign investment in that trade. So it's an integral part. And what's interesting, in our 88 cities, many of them have Asian, African American, Hispanic, and other ethnic mayors, city council members on our school boards. So we're able to work together. We're kind of like the old Silk Road in Urumqi, Kashgar, Namong. It's an international community, and as a result, it has vitality and potential, and why you need public-private partnerships to expand that and not have a big, excessive governmental confiscatory taxation and regulatory environment that stifles investment and job creation. We need to be competitive, but our foreign population has enhanced our ability to be competitive and be a worldwide partner in business and job creation.
Maybe perspectives from Paris on that, Christian?
We find in Paris that you have historical culture and you have dynamic culture, and there is clearly a relation between dynamism of culture, which is creation, and economic development. And we try to work on both fields, attracting artists, but also attracting businessmen. May I quote a wonderful study by Ernst and Young, showing that Paris is one of the most attractive cities in the world.
Then it must be accurate. The last question here.
I'm Praful Kulkarni. I have an architectural design and construction management firm. It's trying to be a global firm. I want to change the whole paradigm of what we're talking about. We have a whole new experiment going on in the Middle East, especially in UAE. The gentleman was asking a question earlier. A day doesn't go by where a new city is being planned. And the governance is different, of course, than what we practice in the West or in democracies. But there is this whole region coming up where the economic development of a city, which is a traditional model through the history of cities, is kind of turned on its head. People have the investments that they can make, and they're creating these opportunities through development for these mega cities. My suspicion is a lot of them are empty, are going to be empty. How do you see this mega region developing given the political order and the investment climate? And what do you recommend for them through your wisdom of developing mega regions?
Anyone want to tackle that first? It's a provocative question. What kind of thoughts, advice to the developing megaregions in the UAE and in the Middle East? Yeah.
My only advice is do it yourself. Don't borrow models from America, from Europe, and you try to think your own development with your own cultural, educational, economical assets. Be yourself. I think that the best secret to develop mega regions, dynamic in the economic field and happy in the quality of life.
Other points of view?
Yes. Another point is also I already mentioned openness. You already have openness, great openness. I appreciate, but openness is still very important. Yes, this should be done by themselves. At the same time, you should accept any resource. This is another important factor to your region developed.
It's a great way to close. I'm sorry we are out of time, but I think that it's been a provocative discussion. I think in many ways what the reporter from China said was interesting, that there's a reshuffling taking place and a rethinking of how to build communities, how to govern communities, how to think in terms of the economic units that comprise the world. And it's something that is very multi-party. It's government, it's private sector, it's the academic community, it's the NGOs, it's a whole array of different parties that I think need to bring their thinking together to figure out whether Dr. Florida has this right, and these mega regions will in fact become increasingly important in the world today, or whether he doesn't have it right. But the reshuffling is definitely taking place. Thank you all for participating, and thank you to the panel.